Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and once again I'm joined by Kevin Graham, where we will be looking at the post-match 3-0 victory over Motherwell. Kevin, first and foremost, were you happy with that performance?
Yes, especially the second half. We looked better in the second half. When it's funny that the players look more fluid when you bring in players to play in their natural positions. When we dropped Ryan Christie back into his number 10 position, brought on a striker and Klimala at the start of the second half as well. We looked better. We didn't look as ponderous on the ball. There was more options for the midfield to create space, to create chances. I think that was one thing on Wednesday night as well, and one thing in the first half today. We were really good at getting into areas to create chances, getting into the areas to develop chances, but not actually creating a chance because there was nobody in the middle of the box. And today, I mean, but you have a look at the team lineup. I think the team lineup today and the first half today was the same problems that we had on Wednesday night. We dominated the ball, but we weren't really creating that opportunities. And for me, it was no surprise. As soon as we bring on a striker, and we can have a discussion about how good or how bad Klimala actually was, he actually done his job when he came on. He gave the Motherwell defence something to think about, by actually playing on the shoulder of the last Motherwell defender. And sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you just need somebody to inject that nuisance factor.
I think
and he
you're right.
Done that.
You're right. Sometimes, I think Stevie, during the post-match bulletin that we had there, Kevin, mentioned the fact that even if a striker's going on and just making a nuisance in himself, and they're actually running the back line and they're not getting much of the ball, they might still stretch the defence. They're still doing a striker's job, if you like. Playing somebody out of position may not have the same impact. And I'm looking at Klimala, and I do want to speak about Klimala because obviously this week a lot of the chat has been all around the strikers, Kevin. We started without a striker 2 games in a row. Thankfully, we were able to find enough in the locker today to get the victory. But up until that superb goal, the opening goal by James Forrest, I was still quite concerned at the fact that we weren't breaking down Motherwell as readily as we were maybe used to. Even in the first game against Hamilton, we were able to break down our defence time and time again. We used the word so well that day, didn't we? Down the right with Frimpong, down the left with Taylor. And it was starting to get a bit stale. It was starting to get a bit stale again. And then a moment of magic from Forrest, and we'll talk about Forrest. But Klimala, he's been on everybody's mind because we've been looking at if Edouard is unfit, as he has been over the last 2 games, do you start with a striker? Well, I think you do. Even if it's Klimala for 55, 60 minutes to try and run the back line and create spaces and stretch them. Because I don't think Klimala is the answer for Celtic as a striker, quite frankly. People might say I've not seen enough of him. I think I have. I don't think he's of the standard, Kevin, as a backup to Edouard or indeed as his partner, because the headline that we've gone with today is begging the question, is Ajeti going to be Edouard's long-term striking partner? So do we change formation and play 2 up front? Obviously it's asking that question also. But in terms of Klimala, I was disappointed with the fact that he had 2 excellent chances today. The first one, you were standing up for him during the game, and you and I were talking about it. The goalkeeper got a wee touch on it, but he was flat-footed. So if you think back to probably the last 6-yard box striker we had was Gary Hooper. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
The kind of poacher, the guy who came alive in the last 20 yards of the pitch. That's the kind of bread and butter. The ball's played along the back, right across the line. I thought Taylor done really well, actually. You've got to put that in. But he was flat-footed and he never even made an effort to get his toe in the ball. The other one was your classic one-on-one. The best person at Celtic Park for that is Edouard. But that guy's a bit special. Klimala, he had his chances. He didn't take them. I don't think that he's going to be a Celtic striker.
I'm on the fence at this precise moment in time because I like the look of him. I like that he's got a bit of strength about him. he's still young. He's came through the Polish League and he's still trying to adjust to being a Celtic player. I think today I saw enough in him in his movement, of his stretching of the defence. You talk about the chances as well. The first one, Greg Taylor's fired the ball across at a rate of knots. The slightest touch by the goalkeeper is going to make it extremely difficult for anybody in that position to try and adjust their feet. And understand what you're actually saying, that he should have been maybe not as flat-footed, but I've seen Eddy being flat-footed in that position. It's just that nick from the goalkeeper is actually caught him off. The second one, is it a poor miss? When you actually see it from behind the goals, he gives the keeper the eyes that he's going to put it in the opposite corner than what he actually tries to do. And the keeper's read it. But it's still too close to the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper hasn't fully extended his leg to save the ball. It's too close to him. That is a poor miss. But I think he done enough today to actually show that he could be an asset to us. Once he gets, maybe Lennon says he's not up to speed, so we've got to say that he isn't up to speed. But I think he done enough today to say that he might have a future. For me, he done more than what Bayo ever done in 45 minutes of football for Celtic today. Well, he showed more than what Bayo had showed. He showed they had more of a football brain than what Bayo had. For me, anyway.
Well, Bayo was one in a long line of strikers that we brought in for that £2 to £2.5 million, Kevin, who simply was a punt. You know, he was a punt on a striker that you would hope was going to turn into someone who you could sell on. He met all the criteria, his age, for example. But again, I agree with you. I see nothing in Bayo that would suggest that he was going to be any kind of long-term project for Celtic. Some people online were suggesting that 1/2 for Toulouse and he scored a couple of goals, etc. Can I just remind you that Tony Cascarino scored a lot of goals at that level of French football, and we know how bad he was at Celtic as well. I think we did the right thing in getting Bayo out on loan, and I would hope, nothing personal against the guy, that turns into a permanent deal. I think he's been a waste of an investment. Klimala, I feel, is going the same way. I'm not going to be too hard on him today. I'm not looking for negatives because we're beating Motherwell today. We've got back on the winning streak. But I just can't see past Griffiths. I can't see past the fact that Griffiths would be a far, far better option for me on that bench. And I would like to know, it would be great to get an update on where Griffiths is in terms of his fitness, because obviously the last we heard, it was a calf strain, wasn't it?
I understand what you're saying there, Paul, I really do. But as I says in the bulletin before the game today, I don't see Griffiths as an option anymore. So I'm maybe just grasping at straws, that I'm looking for things in Klimala, because I know that we're going to need to rely on him. I thought he had good movement today, especially for Ajeti's goal. He did drag the big Motherwell centre half out with him. So maybe I'm just not willing to write him off, because in my mind I'm having a look for positives for him. I'm going to always be positive about him, because I feel that Celtic are going to need him at one point this season, because we can't count on Lee Griffiths.
That's a shame. No, but fair play to you for standing up for the boy, and you have done that all season, because I think you've been impressed with the condition of him. And, fair play to Klimala himself for being able to go and become conditioned as he has done. I just look at that and I think, well, let's say he came on the other night and he was given one of the chances. We'd be cursing our luck right now,
Definitely, but then we didn't look like creating any one of those chances on Wednesday night. And it wasn't until the second half today that we started creating right chances, strikers' chances.
Why do you think that was?
Without being an SFA qualified football coach,
you don't have to be, Kevin.
I know
you're observing it.
But then I've got to give the simple layman's answer. Is because we ended up with two strikers on the pitch who were occupying the Motherwell defence. The Motherwell defence found us very easy to handle in the first half, because they were always looking for the run coming from deep. They were always looking for Cham or Christie making that run from deep. They didn't have anybody on their shoulder. It didn't have anybody willing to roll them in the box. It didn't have anybody like when we're going to talk about Ajeti, but they didn't have anybody like Ajeti who actually found space without moving because he's used to being in that space. He knew where he should have been. So the two Motherwell defenders, or the back three that they had, handled Celtic very easily in the first half. By the time Klimala comes on, he gives them something to be occupied. Then you bring on Ajeti, and it's a completely different story for their back three. They've got two guys who want to get into the box and want to score.
I don't disagree with that, because I think the point I was making on Wednesday there was, you know, if it was a test of fitness, for example, Klimala obviously looks conditioned. I'd have played him for an hour. For an hour to try and stretch their back line before maybe then bringing on Ajeti.
Sorry to interrupt there, Paul, but let's make the point. On the live broadcast on Wednesday night, and anybody watching at home with me, when we equalised, we were the better team and we were cutting through Ferencváros. Very, very simple.
Yeah.
If you would have brought on Klimala or Ajeti at that point, I still reckon we would still be in the Champions League at this point.
I thought that when we scored the goal, as good a goal as it was, and I know there was a deflection which made it dip really late, I thought that was a get out of jail card for Neil Lennon. You know, I've said it before today and I'll say it again. I'm a Celtic fan first and foremost, Kevin, but when you're looking at the reasons why we've lost such an important game, you can't come away and say, oh, it's just the luck of the draw, you win some, you lose some. You can't come away with that kind of thing. You know, I've been sent loads of video messages and articles and comments about how you've got to get behind Neil Lennon, you've got to get behind the team. I'm always behind Neil Lennon, I'm always behind Celtic. But that doesn't mean to say that they're immune from criticism, Kevin. Something went wrong on Wednesday night, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, and it's healthy to be able to look at what went wrong and have an opinion on what went wrong based on the reasoning behind it. So I am behind Neil Lennon. I mean, obviously, when you make a comment that you blame Neil Lennon for our Champions League exit, which I do, and I still do, and beating Motherwell 3-0 at home in the league isn't going to change how I feel about that. But what I think we need to do as a fan base is to realise that, you know, 10 in a row in the league is always going to be the priority, Kevin. But that doesn't mean to say that you just sidestep Europe entirely and bounce out the Champions League, because the finance of the Champions League group stages and progressing within the Champions League is massive to a club like Celtic. It's the only way we can make anything like that kind of money, because we will never make it in Scottish football due to a broadcasting deal or due to sponsorship. So Celtic do extremely well with merchandise and season ticket sales, hospitality, buying and selling players. But in order for us to progress and really progress and continue either with the domination, which I think a lot of fans are happy with, or elsewhere and progress elsewhere, you need the Champions League riches. And that's why it's so disappointing. And that's why you've got to deconstruct the game and come away with an opinion based on that. Because people, even today, you know, do you think you went too hard on Neil Lennon on Wednesday night after beating Motherwell 3-0 today? No, absolutely not. They're two completely different, distinct games and two different competitions, and we're still out of Europe.
Well, let's put it this way. We're so emotionally invested in a game and a club that we have no say in. We can't control what happens on the football part. We can't control what happens behind the scenes at Celtic, but we're so much emotionally invested that we actually think that we can. So when we get to that point on Wednesday night, we can only blame the people who can make decisions that influence what actually happens to this club that we all love. And on Wednesday night, Neil Lennon was that person. Neil Lennon, I fully back Neil Lennon as well. I'm going to sit here and say that. I was surprised with his team selection. I was surprised with his post-match comments, but it's up to him to sort it out. And I want him to sort it out. I don't want him to fail. I want him to bring success to Celtic Football Club. I mean, there is a scenario here. and this is just a scenario, this is maybe not my opinion, but this could be Neil Lennon's last job in football. Because he's already came back to Celtic once, he's already went away, and failure, those who fail this season, history won't be kind to them, whether that's us or whether that's anybody else in Scottish football.
Well, what you mean is Steven Gerrard?
Oh, well, I didn't really want to mention.
We don't tend to talk about them.
But it's not going to be, history's not going to be kind, whatever happens this season on whoever fails this season. And so Neil really has to get it right. And I'm sure himself, a lot of the frustration that he had on Wednesday night after the game was him hurting, because he's gone across that decision in his head. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? And he's doubled down today by sending out the same 11. He's doubled down on his post-match comments and his post-match view that we played well. But when you look at the 90 minutes that we had against Ferencváros and the first 45 minutes today, compared with the second 45 minutes today, you've got to say, by the way, we look better with players in their natural position.
I always think that. I honestly always think that. Unless it's an absolute necessity, Kevin, to play someone in a position, I would always play someone in their natural position. We've seen it so often. We've mentioned a few of the examples. You know, I even remember the game at Ibrox when McGregor was playing left back. That was following a particularly good performance by Johnny Hayes up at Pittodrie at left back. We throw McGregor in, even though he scored what I think was a perfectly good goal that day that was chopped off. He was played at left back, and that was one of the reasons I think that we were beaten that day at Ibrox. So I totally agree with that. The headline that we are running with today is can Ajeti or Ajeti be Eddy's perfect match? And that it raises a few questions, I guess, because we don't always play with two up front. I think last season when Lee Griffiths came in, Kevin, you can tell me your opinion on this as well, it almost revitalised Eddy. Eddy was almost running on empty a wee bit because, you know, he had been leading that line himself all season. And it was the same situation back then. We didn't have anybody to come in and alleviate that issue. When Griffiths came back in and we started playing two up front, it almost gave Edouard a new lease of life. I think he does play well as part of a partnership, a strike force. And I'm now asking the question, is Ajeti that man to partner Edouard? Can we, and then if he is, then we've got to change obviously the way that we are actually shaping up in terms of the the formation.
Definitely, and I do think that you're right what you're saying. When we went to the 3-5-2 after the winter break last year, Eddy sometimes looks very isolated up front himself. If we're having a poor game and there's not many chances being created, he can sometimes drop that deep that he tries to do it himself. And sometimes he's very... I mean, what we've maybe got to remember as well, Brendan Rodgers wanted to play Dembele and Edouard up front in a two. And they'd played a 3-5-2 all pre-season with the two of them up front. It never happened, and I would have loved to have seen that for a period of time. That would have been great. So Eddy, I think any striker likes a bit of a hand up front, because then you haven't got the big hairy-arsed centre halves only with one person to deal with. I mean, if he's up against, I mean, you look how packed the defences are that we face. Yeah. It's very easy if you're the furthest man up front to actually get outnumbered at times. And Eddy is absolutely fantastic at dancing through 4 or 5 challenges, 3 or 4 challenges, but that's not going to happen all the time. Sometimes he needs somebody up there to help him create space. Sometimes he'll need to help to create space for somebody else. And it's a whole argument as well. Eddy can drop deep. I like seeing him running from deep. I like seeing him appearing on the left-hand touchline. Look at the goal that he scored at Ibrox at the 3-2 game. He appeared out wide, dragging a centre-half out wide where he doesn't want to be. He likes isolating people, and somebody up front with him will help him isolate centre-halves, find space, or dragging the centre-halves where they don't want to be. I mean, I think for the goal today, Klimala dragged the Motherwell centre-half out where he didn't want to be. And Ajeti was the benefactor for that.
So from the 3 substitute appearances that you've seen so far, Kevin, is Albion Ajeti the man to partner Edouard? I mean, I've been fairly impressed. I know he might look as though he's carrying a wee bit of timber. We said that earlier on, which is obviously going to improve as his fitness improves. Is he the guy to partner Edouard?
Well, yes. The reason being, you don't pay £5 million for a striker for him to sit on the bench. And we says that when we were talking about Ivan Toney as well. If you're spending that kind of money on a striker, and if for the Scottish game, the guy is going to play. I understand what you say about Ajeti looks. Maybe that's just his build. He reminded me a wee bit of Scott McDonald. The way he struck the ball today for his goal reminded me quite a bit of Scott McDonald. I know I can see the Gary Hooper comparison as well, but there was a couple of moments, more against Dundee United, when he rolled the centre half using his back and his bum, for a want of a better word. And
it was good enough for Kenny Dalglish.
Well, it reminded me a bit of Scott McDonald, and I was going to mention Dalglish as well. So, of course, I would love to see it. I love Celtic playing with two strikers, but understand that the fad in coaching and in football today is a kind of one up front with two wide forwards now, But that's 2 and 2 starts. That's 2 and 2 league sub appearances for Ajeti. The other night when he came on against Ferencváros, they had got a massive boost when they had scored that second goal, and they had got the extra legs, the extra energy in their legs. So it was very difficult for him to come on and make an impact in that game, especially when the Celtic team's heads looked like they had really, really went down. So I'm going to say yes. For a simple answer, for a long-winded answer there, I'm going to say yes.
No, absolutely perfect, Kevin. I mean, what we'll do is we're going out live on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter, so we'll have a look at some of the comments coming in. We've been blown away, in actual fact, with the amount of people getting involved in the Celtic State of Mind bulletins. We're going to keep them going. We try to do them every single day, but now and again we might have a day off. During the week or one day at the weekend, Kevin, but we do try and put them out, and we certainly do put content out every single day. So even if there isn't a bulletin, we will put a podcast out. So please continue to get involved, because a lot of your opinions and discussion points are what keeps the whole thing going, particularly, Kevin, when I'm doing it solo, as I did on Friday. So Paul, you've come through via Twitter, and you reckon that it might be his replacement. Ajeti might be Edouard's replacement. I must say, I've kind of been glad to hear that Edouard's making positive noises in that respect, Kevin. He isn't looking to make that move yet, is he?
It might be a long-term replacement, but I don't see it this season. I really don't. I see them playing together this season.
Well, another point, just to go back on something you said earlier about how great it would have been to see Dembele and Edouard partnership for Celtic. One of these days we'll be watching the World Cup finals, and that pair will be playing up front for France.
Oh, I can't disagree there. The French have got an embarrassment of riches up top at this precise moment in time with Mbappe, Griezmann, Dembele as well, But Edouard's still a young laddie, still 22. He's got another 10 years at the top of the game. I says when Dembele left Celtic that he would win a Champions League medal, and that opinion hasn't changed. And could I say the same about Edouard? Yes. I reckon by the time both of those players have finished their career, they will have won the Champions League.
But I always rated him, Kevin, after I seen him at Douglas Park that night, and people were saying he was a bit lazy. I told you he was going to be a superstar. Gary,
I didn't say he was lazy. What I actually says about him was he had something, but I couldn't quite work out what he had.
I'll go back on the podcast and I'll quote what you said. I can't remember what it is. Gary Doonan. Thanks again, Gary, for getting involved during the day. This is your 5th broadcast of today, so you're commenting via Facebook. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Need to get Ajeti fit before he partners him. Looking at Klimala, composure, 3 good chances, 2 bad misses. Maybe this is what Lenny has been seeing in training more than any of us. Maybe
Lennon's been right all along. Maybe his comment
he's not ready
is correct.
Because I don't think he said he was not fit. He's not ready, is that right?
Well, I think he kind of jumped between the two when he was pushed on it.
Yeah. Well, again...
He's went more with the development angle over the last couple of days. I think that's clear.
Rather than the fitness aspect of it. Yeah, because I was finding it difficult to to figure out how someone couldn't be fit if they've been training for 7 months.
And he's got 45 minutes a day.
Yeah. Michael the Boy, you're commenting via Twitter. Great to have you involved. Griff's back in training, Paul. I reckon be back in 2 weeks at least on the bench. I'd love to see it. Got to say, there's certain things we talk about, but I mean, Lee Griffiths is still a Celtic player, so
this is maybe going to sound flippant by me, but whose bench? Hibs or Aberdeen's?
I would be very reluctant to put him anywhere, even on loan to another Scottish club. I really would. Because in this season of all seasons, can you imagine you're one of the pivotal games playing against Hibs? Because Hibs, I don't know what their score is just now, they're looking good this season. Aberdeen going up to Pittodrie, I would not fancy facing Lee Griffiths. I really wouldn't.
As long as we put it in the contract that he can't play against us. Would I accept Lee Griffiths going on loan? I'm just going to go back to what I said 15 minutes ago. I no longer see Lee Griffiths as having a future at Celtic, and I really do hope that I'm wrong.
I hope you're wrong.
So do I.
I had a very interesting discussion just the other day coming home on Friday regarding the Gary O'Connor documentary that was on the other week there on the BBC. And we were talking about how all of these players that seem to have been, I don't know, bitten by some bug at Easter Road, and their careers go into kind of free fall. Gary O'Connor and Derek Riordan, Anthony Stokes. I don't want to put Jason Cummins in the same kind of bracket. I don't want to put Lee Griffiths in the same bracket, But it's almost as if all these players, certainly the ones that have retired so far, still had 4 or 5 years in them. And I don't want to see the same thing happen to Lee Griffiths, Kevin. I want to see him back in a Celtic jersey this season.
What I would say, out of all the names that you've mentioned there, Lee Griffiths has been the success story.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at the medals that he's won, the 2 goals for Scotland against England, which are going to live, they're part of Scottish football history now.
Yeah.
The goals, his 43-goal season for Celtic as well. I think he's had his head screwed on more than some of the players that you've actually mentioned. But he's now 30. He's getting into the twilight of his career. And let's just say that the niggling injuries is true, that he keeps on getting these calf strains, then he might not have long left at the top. So it's up to him to prove to Lennon and any other manager that's going to be willing to take a chance on him that he's still got it. I'm sure he has still got it, and I want him to contribute to Celtic and what hopefully is going to be a momentous season.
I know that you have stood up for Klimala. There's quite a few points coming through and we'll work our way through them. You've stood up for Klimala. We know what Griffiths can do. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we're going to see the same Lee Griffiths who scored 42 goals under Ronnie Dyler. I don't think that we'll ever get back to that stage, Kevin.
No.
However, we did see glimpses last season of what Lee Griffiths could offer us, and I think no one would be more disappointed than Lee himself that the season finished when it did, because he was getting back into his stride, wasn't he? Scoring goals. Who's the better option between Klimala and Griffiths?
Let me put it this way, and the better option between Klimala and Griffiths is Lee Griffiths, because we know what Lee Griffiths can do. That goes without saying. That's plain, that's fact, because we know what Lee Griffiths can do. Let me put it another way as well. Who's better, Bargas or Fraser Foster? Who would you rather have? I'm going to say Fraser Foster, because Fraser Foster's like one of my wings. I know what he can do and what he can't do. I don't really know nothing about Bargas yet. And my judgment on Klimala, I don't know if the viewers are agreeing with me, they're probably not, which is fine. My judgment on Klimala is based on what we've got just now, and it's what I hope that he's going to turn into. I know what Lee Griffiths can do for us if he's mentally and physically right.
Yeah.
So if he comes back mentally and physically right, of course he's in front of Klimala.
Well, we'll all read through some of the comments. No, I get what you mean there. That's the difficulty within this situation that we have, Kevin, in actual fact. Barca Boy, welcome back. You're commenting via Twitter. The hold-up play was great from Klimala, linked midfield and ran the channels like a proper forward. I think that's what you were saying as well, Kevin. So we're in agreement with you there, Barca Boy, and I think that was maybe the frustration on Wednesday night, because that's what we could have got from Klimala had he played striker. Even if he was going to tire after 60 minutes, and then you start looking at the bench. But again, having made the decision which Neil Lennon made, I really think the pivotal moment was when Christie scored that equaliser. That's when the change should have been made.
Definitely, we've already spoke about that, and I say bringing on a striker at that point would have created, even though we were cutting through them at that point, for me, bringing on a striker at that point wins us a game.
Another point coming in from follower Celtic. Klimala could be a Griff, but I'd prefer a Hartson Musa Dembele big man partnership for Ajeti. I'm hoping that the partnership would be Edouard and Ajeti. But then, if you're going for, and let's not forget, we're still going for the 3 domestic trophies, the Scottish Cup from last season, potentially the Europa League. There's still 5 competitions to play in. And what you want is you want to be able to call on your second and third choice strikers should the situation arise, as it inevitably will when you're playing in 5 competitions.
Of course, we are going to have injuries. Eddy's been injured the last 2 games. We are going to pick up injuries in the number of games that we're going to have, and what is a shortened season as well. We're going to need to rely on 3 strikers, maybe even 4 strikers. And it's the same all over. We're looking very slight at the moment in the left-back area because we have only got 1 left-back. The centre-half area as well, depending on what happens before the transfer window closes as well. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see us needing 2 centre-halves before the end of this international break.
Here's a wee poser for you and for the audience who are tuning in, and we're going to work through as many of your comments as possible. You just said we've only got 1 left back. We've actually got 2, because as I said before, Griffiths is still our player, Bolingoli is still our player, right? Now the dust is settled on that. He's got his ban, 5-match ban. He's got his ban, right? He's still an asset to Celtic. Now, if we never play him again, he's going to be a very difficult asset to move on. If we do, and I don't know how likely that is or otherwise, Kevin, if we do play him again, he becomes an asset again. And he can either be an asset on the field to play for us, or one that we can move on in a permanent deal, which is highly unlikely at this moment in time as things stand. So we do only have 1 left back. Do you see a time where Bolingoli plays for Celtic again?
There's 2 views on this. I take your asset view. If Neil Lennon is instructed by those who are in charge of the finances to play him, then to try and to play him, then he'll play. If the squad are quite forceful and say they do not want Bolingoli in the squad, I mean, Lennon says that he's never been back at Celtic Park since his misdemeanor. So how is he going to reintegrate with the squad? Are the squad going to welcome him back? Is Lennon going to need to put this to the squad, going, look,
potentially
he's going to need to come back in here. What is your thoughts? Are you going to welcome him?
We've got 5 tournaments to play for this season, and as you say, the squad isn't as deep as it could be.
How was he standing in the squad anyway? Was he liked? Was he one of the main characters? Different guys, was he on like the outskirts of the squad? Maybe that's how he thought he could get away with it. I mean, for what we can actually gather, it's not the first time that he's went over Lennon's head and done something that maybe he should have got pulled up for and disciplined for before. So does he think he can just ride roughshod over Neil Lennon? Does Lennon maybe have to make an example of him if there's unrest in the camp? There's so many questions. There are. But it all depends, for me, on the squad. Are the squad
and how they're going to accept him?
Are they going to welcome him back in?
Yeah, absolutely. Francie W, good to hear from you again. You're commenting via YouTube. Ajeti will be excellent when he gains full fitness. We've also got a comment coming in from CR 1988. A famous year in Celtic history, Kevin. One enjoyed by us too, I know that much. Griffiths is done for me. Would love to see how many calf strains he's had over the past few years. It's one of the ones where I look at the situation today, and obviously Edouard is everybody's number 1 pick. I would hope that we can play 2 up front, but I keep going back to it. We've got 5 competitions. We've got a player in Griffiths that if we were to go and buy him in terms of ability, Kevin, and what he can bring to the squad, he's a better player than Klimala, and we paid, what, £3 million for him. He's an asset. But he's only an asset if he can play. I get that. But there are a lot of fans who don't think, and you're one of them, you don't think you'll see him back in a Celtic jersey. And that saddens me. I would love to see Griffiths back playing at some stage.
And that this is, I'm actually torn when I say these words. But if you're asking me truthfully what's in my mind at this precise moment in time about Lee Griffiths, and I do not consider him contributing to Celtic this season just with what's going on. And I'm not writing him off. And I hope that I'm really, really wrong, because he is such a lovable wee rogue, a guy who is talented, who is good at his job, and who would benefit the football club.
We've got a comment coming in from Stephen Ray. Welcome back, Stephen, and you're commenting via YouTube. Yet again, Brown finishes a game he did very little in and was on a yellow card for most of it. Discuss. Were you impressed with Scott Brown today? Did you feel that he had a
never really
game?
saw him. Maybe so. I maybe agree with Stephen at that point. I don't think it was a Brown type game. I was more impressed with the leadership qualities shown by James Forrest and Callum McGregor.
Yeah, they definitely outshone him. Yeah,
they led by example today with their performances. McGregor's drive for the first goal, Forrest's finish, and in the second half, Forrest created quite a few chances, created Ajeti's goal, and Callum McGregor was fantastic today as well. They showed that leadership, there's two types of leadership. There's the shouting type, hard tackling type leadership, and there's a type of leadership where you grab the game by the scruff of the neck, and both of them done that for me today.
What about Encham then? Were you impressed with Encham today?
No.
No?
I don't
and I know you're a fan.
I don't think he done enough.
He played a ball today, Kevin, that only Encham, no one else in Scottish football could have played that ball. And he gives you a wee glimpse of what he can do. But today was one of those days where he was too anonymous for too long.
He's a bit like the Celtic pass stream, eh? It shows you a glimpse of what's going on, then it freezes and admires itself that it's worked for 10 minutes, then it's decided to freeze. That's probably harsh on Encham. But I don't think he's done enough since he's came back into when we all shouted for him to come into the team. I think it was interesting to hear the lads in the post-match saying that Neil Lennon was maybe playing his best outfield 10.
Yeah,
and it was to the detriment of our performance. And I think in the second half that kind of was proved when we had guys moving back into their natural positions. We were more fluid.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think Cham's maybe been the last 3 games. I don't think I haven't been overly impressed by Cham.
It's a good question by Stephen Ray, though, in relation to Scott Brown, because there's a train of thought where, we're less effective with him in the team, which is, it sounds bizarre to say it in actual fact, because he's been so influential during this domination over the last 9 years. He's been written off so many times as well, Kevin, hasn't he? But he's so important to Celtic and to the success of the side. I can't see a dropping taking place, to be honest with you. And I know we've got David Turnbull, now looking for a position. I was saying that to Jim earlier. At this moment in time, I don't think anybody's playing poorly enough to drop them for Turnbull to get a game. Where does he fit
in? Just going back to Scott Brown, I mean, would Scott Brown's there to give leadership? He's like the rock that team's built on. And when you look at the teams that Neil Lennon played in, they always had those players. Martin O'Neill was very, very big on loyalty players, big personalities, and Brown has got that massive, massive personality. Would Callum McGregor and James Forrest had the performances today if Scott Brown wasn't on the park? If Scott Brown's presence wasn't on that park? We can't answer that, but he was on that park, and we saw what Callum McGregor and James Forrest. You saw what Callum McGregor and James Forrest turned up today. Also, Christian Frimpong as well, I thought had really good games. So I can't see a drop of Scott Brown coming. I think this is maybe Brown's last, well, we've said this plenty of times, but I think this is maybe Scott Brown's last season as a starter because of the mental importance to the team.
Yeah, the mental importance will be vitally important going forward to 10 in a row. Sean McCrory, 8, makes a point that Griffiths is an unbelievable talent, but his time is done. He's a hindrance now to the club. It's a difficult one because I don't think I like to make any comments about what's happening at the club with Lee Griffiths at this moment in time, because I don't know. We've got to take it as read that he's got a calf strain, and we hope that he would be back to fitness. Another point that was made earlier, which I thought was excellent from Paul Kelly, who was on the match day panel, was that we signed Turnbull and it almost injects a bit of life into McGregor and Forrest. Brilliant. Excellent if that's happened. And that's what new arrivals can do to people as well. And I still think, Kevin, this is another question. We've got a wee break now coming up for the international break. I still think we need to strengthen in the defence. I really do. And I still think that although I like Ayer and Julian as a partnership, I still like to see a centre-half coming in.
I just realised that I never actually answered your Turnbull question there. You mentioned all the games that we've got to play. I see him playing either alongside Brown or in the Ryan Christie role. I think I can see him getting game time in those two roles. Maybe not starting, but because of the number of games, the number of injuries, the number of suspensions that we are going to pick up, he is going to get game time. And I reckon that he's going to be comfortable in either the 8 or the 10 role. Defensively, I still think we need a centre-half, and I think Neil Lennon, the club, the coaching staff realise that we need a centre-half as well. We've been linked for what seems like 18 months with Shane Duffy, and we don't know what's actually happening there.
You're still locked in your cupboard, Kev?
I'm still locked in my cupboard, waiting on somebody to open the cupboard door for Shane Duffy. And today we've been linked with Omar Colley, who would be a big signing. Money signing.
Yeah.
So could we be looking to bring in both of them? I don't know. That depends if Ayer maybe gets the move that's rumoured that he wants. If Ayer leaves, then yes, we need to bring in both of them. And it's quite interesting as well. Both players are 28. They're not young. They're not young development players. We're going to be shelling out an awful lot of money on both of them when there's not really any sell-on value, which is a change of model, if you wish.
Well, again, when you look at, I know Turnbull has been brought in, and there's certainly the potential that he's going to develop, and there will be a sell-on value in the future. But you know, other than that disappointment on Wednesday, we were sitting here looking at the transfer activity of Celtic. You're bringing in El Yunusi, you're bringing in Ajeti and Barkas, and now Turnbull, and you know, that's great business. That's brilliant business. It just would have been fantastic had we done it 2 or 3 weeks before the European Games. And I know that's not always possible, Kevin. No. You know, I'm realistic, and I know that. But that for me is a different approach to signing players. I think that's a higher calibre of player than the January transfer window that we just experienced there, and the January transfer window the season before. I think this is a different calibre of player, and if we sign someone like Shane Duffy, or if we are serious about Omar Colley, you know, the Sampdoria player, at that price, then I think we've already started a different approach. I really do. Maybe we've been stung too many times, Kevin. Maybe the wee nugget in every 4 or 5 players is becoming harder and harder to find. I think we've had an absolute find in Jeremy Frimpong.
Definitely.
And I think today, one of the biggest points I would make from today is that's the Jeremy Frimpong that we fell in love with when he came onto the scene, wasn't it? I don't think he's a right back. I don't think we should continually try and play him at right back. That boy's all about forward play. He's all about creating chances. He can go in mazy runs. He wins you space. He wins you free kicks, set pieces. Just forget about him as a right back. Frimpong's not a right back, but when you see him today, and actually in spells on Wednesday night, Kevin, when he came on, that's the type of boy that got us excited last season.
Definitely, that's true. And it was interesting reading the match day programme today. There's an interview with Jeremy Frimpong in it, and he praises Danny McGrain highly for his development.
Oh,
and he says he always speaks to Danny McGrain. But there was one thing that jumped out to me when I read it. He says that he wants to improve on his assists and his goals. And I think that's one thing it's missing for him to move up the park. I mean, he was a winger to start off with in Holland, and Man City converted him to a right back because his assist rate and his goal scoring rate wasn't good enough for a right hand sided forward. So that is something that needs developed with Jeremy Frimpong. But today he played with a freedom because I think he was comfortable that Brown and El Hamed behind him had his back. And he could go forward. I mean, he gave that Motherwell player a torrid time when he came on.
Yeah.
That Motherwell player didn't know what had happened when Jeremy Frimpong came on today. And so he is an asset, but I do agree. I think he needs to be pushing James Forrest on that right-hand side rather than us looking at a right-back role for him.
One final point, Kevin, before we wrap up our 5th broadcast of the day, and it's from Gary Doonan, who, you know, is always welcome on a Celtic State of Mind. And in actual fact, Gary, you should come in. You should come into the studio and join us.
I feel like I know Gary now.
Yes, and you're calling us or you're getting in touch via Facebook, and what you're saying is people talking about Forrest needing someone to push him. You've just mentioned that yourself on the right-hand side. What about Forrest pushing our left flank players? Great when he went left 2 weeks in a row. Yeah, totally agree with that. I thought when he came on against Dundee United, he made a big difference and he's playing on the left. You've seen him switching today, you know, when Frimpong came on and Forrest went out left. I'm a bit saddened that it normally means El Yunusi's not having a good game, because I like El Yunusi, and, you know, I thought he was one of our better performers on Wednesday night, but he wasn't great again today. Yet Forrest is when he goes out left. Just let's finish off by speaking about Forrest and a wee bit of appreciation, Kevin, because he is probably the most criticised Celtic player in the squad, yet he showed once again what he can do.
Yes.
What a goal.
It's, why are we so hard on academy players? Why are we so hard on guys that we bring through? James Forrest is a wide player, and wide players are going to have good days and bad days. Wide players can go out a game for 70 odd minutes and have one touch and create an assist, but still do. That's all they're remembered for is making that assist. But they can have a poor game, but they can still do one thing in that 90 minutes which turn the game on its head. I think people underappreciate James Forrest, what he brings to that team. And it was interesting, there was a comment, that's 4 Celtic managers that have played James Forrest. And let's not forget that Brendan Rodgers, for all we think of Brendan Rodgers, when James Forrest went into the last year of his contract, we weren't going to be too disappointed if he was ending up in the English Championship at that point. I don't remember us being overly concerned that he was maybe going to leave us as a Bosman. Then Rodgers turned him round. He is a consistent wide player for us, and he has got the ability to turn games on the head. And you saw that his finish today was
sublime.
Was absolutely fantastic. He's cutting in from the left hand side today. He's fleet of
There was an urgency about him today as well.
There was an urgency about him,
yeah.
and that's the way that he needs to play, Paul. I'm actually quite glad you said that. I was looking for that word, urgency. When James Forrest plays with urgency, there's no better wide forward player in Scotland than James Forrest.
Brilliant. Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. This is our 2nd broadcast of the day. Thank you everybody who's tuning in via Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. We're up to 250,000 a month. So I think we've doubled our audience, Kevin, and that for us is brilliant, and we love it, and we love putting the broadcasts out on a regular basis, particularly when you can get involved and it's all live and interactive. So please join us again. We'll be back tomorrow for another bulletin, and let us know what you think, and get subscribing on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. All that's left for me to say is thank you, Kevin Graham, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you, everybody.